So today we're going to talk about a single word that has literally started revolutions and built nations. It's a value that most of us feel like we believe in, but man, it can be really hard to define: equality. You've heard this before, right? For centuries, this has been so much more than just a slogan. It's been a powerful, world-changing rallying cry, an ideal that has pushed humanity forward. And this idea pops up everywhere. You can find it in holy books, you can find it in the constitutions of modern countries. The message is always surprisingly similar. Every single human being has equal worth.
Okay, so if this idea is so universal, then we have a problem, a big one. Why is there such a huge, glaring gap between this thing we say we believe in and the world we actually live in? Let's just look at the numbers for a second, because they are staggering. Take the world's 50 richest people.
Their combined income is now greater than the income of the world's 400 million poorest people. Just let that sink in for a moment. 50 people on one side of the scale, 400 million on the other.
And if we zoom out, the picture doesn't get any prettier. The wealthiest 10% of everyone on Earth, they control more than half of all the income. Meanwhile, the poorest 40%, that's almost half the planet, are scraping by on just 5%.
All right, to even begin to wrap our heads around this, we've got to ask a really important question. Is all inequality actually the same? And believe me, the answer is way more complicated than you might think.
And this is where a little bit of political theory comes in super handy. It helps us split inequality into two different buckets. On one side, you have natural inequalities. We're all born with different talents, different skills. But on the other, you have social inequalities. And those are the ones we create as a society. Things like unequal access to opportunity or one group exploiting another.
And that difference is everything. It's those social inequalities, the ones that are based on who your parents are or where you were born, not on your actual abilities. Those are the ones that stop people from reaching their potential. And that's what the whole fight for equality is really about.
So, how do we even start to fix this? Well, thinkers have often broken down this huge idea of equality into three key areas, or dimensions, that all work together.
First up, you've got political equality. This is the bedrock, right? The idea that every citizen gets a vote, that we're all equal in the eyes of the law. Then there's social equality, which is all about making sure everyone has a fair shot at a good life, access to things like decent healthcare and education. And finally, the big one, economic equality, which is all about trying to shrink those massive gaps in wealth we were just looking at.
Okay, so that's the what, but what about the how? How do we actually make society more equal? Well, as you can probably guess, different philosophies have very different answers to that question.
So on one hand, you have thinkers in the Marxist or socialist tradition. They look at this and say the root problem is the private ownership of major resources, like factories and land. Their solution? Public control, to make sure wealth gets spread around more fairly. But then you've got liberalism on the other side of the coin. It argues that the best and fairest system is fair competition. As long as everyone starts at the same line with equal opportunity, then letting talent and hard work decide the outcome is the most just way.
But wait, other perspectives, like feminism, say, hold on a second, you're missing a huge piece of the puzzle. Feminism points to another powerful system that drives inequality: patriarchy. This is a social, cultural, and economic system where, historically, men have held more power and have been seen as more important than women.
And to really get at this, feminists make this super important distinction between sex and gender. Sex is the biological difference, but gender, that's all the roles, the expectations, the behaviors that society basically makes up and assigns to men and women. And here's the key takeaway. Most of the inequalities we see between men and women aren't about biology. They're about these man-made gender roles.
This whole idea, it leads us straight into probably the thorniest, most debated part of this whole conversation. To create a playing field that's truly level, do you sometimes have to treat people differently? Let me give you a classic analogy that just nails this point. Picture a teacher standing in front of a bunch of different animals, say an elephant, a fish, and a monkey. And the teacher says, okay, for a totally fair selection, everyone has to take the exact same test. You all have to climb that tree.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous, right? We all know who's going to win that contest. But that little story perfectly explains the logic behind policies like positive action, or as it's often called, affirmative action. The whole idea is that treating everyone the exact same way isn't fair if they're all starting from completely different places.
The whole point of these policies is to try and correct for the lasting effects of past discrimination. They're trying to help entire communities that have been held back for generations overcome those built-in barriers, so they can finally compete on a playing field that's actually level.
But, and this is a big but, not everyone is on board with this approach. Critics have some pretty strong arguments against it. They'll say it's basically reverse discrimination. They'll argue it's not fair because it violates the basic right of every individual to be treated equally. And some even say that by focusing on categories like caste or race, these policies end up making those social divisions even stronger.
So what this all shows us is the real tension at the heart of equality. The goal, it isn't to treat every single person in the exact same identical way no matter what.
No, the goal is to make sure that everyone can actually enjoy the same basic rights and have access to the same real opportunities. And if that means you need to give some people a boost to help them overcome unique obstacles, well, sometimes that's what it takes.
And that leaves us right here with the million-dollar question we all have to grapple with. Where do you draw the line? What kind of different treatment is justified to build a more equal world, and at what point does it stop being about fairness and start creating a whole new kind of privilege? Figuring that out, that's the ongoing challenge for all of us.